Hear the drums of Rome before the sun rises. March 5th, 363 AD. The Euphrates glows red beneath a rising Mesopotamian sun as one of the greatest armies in Roman history surges eastward. 95,000 legionaries march in iron discipline, their standards cutting through dust and heat like spears of flame. At their head rides Emperor Julian, philosopher king, warrior, the last pagan ruler of Rome, driven by a hunger for immortal glory. Ahead lies Ctesiphon, capital of the Sassanid Empire, glittering behind its walls like a final prize. Conquer it, and Julian will eclipse Trajan. Fail, and Rome will bleed in the desert. But the land does not welcome emperors. The deeper the legions advance, the more Mesopotamia turns hostile. Crops burn, wells run dry, Persian shadows strike and vanish, supply lines thin, confidence erodes. What begins as a triumphal invasion becomes a march into a furnace. Then the army turns back, and retreat becomes nightmare. Near Samarra, amid dust, confusion, and skirmishing steel, fate finds its moment. A single spear tears into Julian's side. The emperor falls, his blood darkening the sand as the Roman army freezes in disbelief. This is Julian's Persian Expedition, a campaign of towering ambition and catastrophic miscalculation. The final blaze of Rome's ancient war with Persia. The moment an emperor dies, an army is trapped and history pivots. Stay with me, because this is not merely a failed invasion. It is the story of how empires break, not with a siege, but with a march too far into the fire. Part 1. Setup. Julian's ambition and the shadow of Persia. Flashback to 361 AD. Rome changes emperors, but not quietly. Julian, nephew of Constantine the Great, rises to the purple after the sudden death of Constantius II. His ascent is unlikely, almost defiant. Raised under suspicion, educated in isolation, a philosopher forced to survive in a Christian court that quietly murdered his family. And beneath it all, a secret he carried for years. Julian is a pagan. When power finally falls into his hands, he makes no apology. He rejects Christianity, restores the ancient gods, and declares himself heir not to Constantine, but to Marcus Aurelius, to Plato, to Alexander. History will remember him as Julian the Apostate, but to himself, he is Rome reborn. Yet an emperor needs more than faith. He needs victory. To the east rises Rome's eternal rival, Sassanid Persia. For generations, the two empires have bled one another along the Mesopotamian frontier. And now Persia is ruled by Shapur II, a king hardened by decades of war, master of mobile armies, raider of Roman borders. His forces strike, withdraw, and strike again, draining Rome without ever offering decisive battle. Julian sees his moment. He will not defend the frontier. He will end the war. Inspired by Alexander's march centuries before, Julian conceives a campaign of breathtaking ambition. Invade Persia itself. Strike directly. At its heart, seize Ctesiphon, and force Shapur to submit. One war, one emperor, one immortal legacy. The preparations are vast. Nearly 95,000 soldiers are mobilized. About 65,000 march with Julian down the Euphrates, supported by an enormous river fleet, more than 1,100 ships carrying grain, weapons, and siege engines. Another 30,000 men under the general Procopius advance through northern Mesopotamia, meant to converge on Persia from two directions. It is one of the largest Roman expeditions since Trajan. Shapur responds not with panic, but with patience. He avoids open battle, withdraws his main forces, orders crops burned, wells poisoned, towns emptied. Persian cavalry shadows the Roman advance, striking supply lines, vanishing into the heat. Shapur plans not to fight Julian, but to let Mesopotamia fight for him. The stakes could not be higher. For Rome, this campaign promises security or disaster. For Julian, it is more than war. It is a test of destiny, a chance to restore the old gods, reclaim Rome's ancient spirit, and carve his name beside the greatest conquerors in history. The march begins in triumph. Standards gleam. Legions advance. The Euphrates carries Rome forward like a promise. But beneath the boots of the legions, the sands are already shifting. And as the army pushes deeper into Persia, the road ahead will narrow, until ambition itself becomes the trap. Part 2. The March into Mesopotamia. Early victories and ominous signs. March 5th, 363 AD. Julian departs Antioch at the head of his army, the banners of Rome snapping in the spring wind. The Euphrates is crossed at Hierapolis, and the invasion begins in earnest. Legion after legion pours into Mesopotamia, moving south in disciplined columns, while an immense river fleet parallels their advance, more than 1,000 ships carrying grain, weapons, siege engines, and the promise of sustained war. At first, everything goes according to plan. Persian frontier defenses crumble. The fortress of Anatha falls after fierce fighting. Dura surrenders. Smaller strongholds capitulate without resistance, their garrisons fleeing inland. Roman morale soars. To the soldiers, this feels like the old days. Trajan reborn, Persia trembling, victory inevitable. Julian presses forward relentlessly. The army marches through sun-scorched plains and irrigated lowlands, following the Euphrates deeper into enemy territory. The fleet keeps pace, its hulls heavy with supplies. Smoke rises behind the Romans as captured towns are stripped and destroyed, denying the Persians use of their own land. By late May, the impossible seems within reach. The legions arrive before Ctesiphon. Before them rises the capital of the Sassanid Empire. Vast walls, deep moats, towers glinting above the Tigris. Julian wins a sharp engagement outside the city at Koche, driving Persian defenders back and proving Roman dominance in open battle. The road to immortality appears open, but the city does not fall. The walls are too strong. The garrison holds. Shapur II remains unseen, his main army nowhere to be found. There is no decisive battle, no Persian collapse, only delay. And while Julian waits, the land turns hostile. Flooded canals ruin Roman supply routes. Heat intensifies. Food grows scarce. Persian cavalry harasses the outskirts, striking foragers and vanishing. Fields lie burned. Wells run dry. The deeper the army pushes, the more it begins to starve. Then Julian makes the decision that seals his fate. Believing speed is now essential, and fearing the fleet will slow him, he orders the ships burned. 1,100 vessels go up in flames along the riverbanks. With them vanish surplus grain, siege equipment, and the only reliable supply line back to safety. The army is now trapped inland, dependent on a countryside that has already been stripped bare. It is a gamble meant to force victory. Instead, it removes every path of retreat. The siege of Ctesiphon is abandoned. Julian cannot breach the city. Shapur still refuses battle. The emperor gives the order to turn north, to march back through devastated territory, hunted by an enemy that controls the land. The campaign has crossed its point of no return. What began as a triumphant invasion is now a race against hunger, heat, and exhaustion. Supplies dwindle, morale falters, discipline strains under constant skirmishing. The legions begin their retreat, and with every mile, the shadow of disaster grows longer. Because ahead lies not salvation, but a march through death itself. Part 3. Siege of Ctesiphon, Stalemate and Fatal Retreat. By late May 363 AD, Julian stands before his prize. Across the Tigris River rise the twin cities of Ctesiphon, capital of the Sassanid Empire, ringed by massive walls, deep moats, and centuries of defensive engineering. It is one of the most formidable cities Rome has ever faced. To take it would end the war in a single stroke. Julian wastes no time. Outside the city, Roman forces clash with a Persian field army sent to block the approach. The battle is fierce but decisive. Roman discipline prevails. Roughly 2,500 Persian soldiers are killed, and the defenders are driven back behind the walls. The victory confirms Julian's belief. In open battle, Rome still reigns supreme. But victory on the field is not victory in war. The siege begins and immediately stalls. Ctesiphon's walls are too strong. The city is well supplied. Roman siege engines are limited, and many have already been destroyed or abandoned. Worse still, the army's own supplies are running dangerously low. The river fleet that sustained the advance now feels like a liability rather than an asset. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Shapur II's main army is approaching. Julian faces an impossible choice: stay and risk encirclement, starvation, and annihilation, or withdraw and march through a land already stripped bare. On June 16th, Julian chooses retreat. The siege of Ctesiphon is abandoned. To prevent the fleet from falling into Persian hands and to force speed, Julian orders the destruction of his ships. The Euphrates burns again as vessels are set ablaze, their grain, equipment, and siege tools lost forever. The army turns north, away from victory, toward survival. What follows is not an organized withdrawal. It is a running battle. Persian cavalry swarms the Roman columns day and night. Foragers are cut down. Stragglers vanish. Scorched earth leaves the legions starving and dehydrated under the Mesopotamian sun. Discipline erodes as exhaustion sets in. The march becomes a test of endurance, with no margin for error. Then, on June 26th, near Samarra, fate strikes. Persian forces attack again. Julian, refusing armor and unwilling to command from the rear, rides forward to rally his men. In the chaos of close combat, a spear flies from the melee, its origin unknown. It strikes Julian in the side, piercing his liver. The emperor is carried from the field. By nightfall, Julian is dead. The Roman army is leaderless, deep in enemy territory, surrounded and starving. Panic threatens collapse. The officers act quickly. They elevate Jovian, a senior commander, to the purple, not to conquer, but to survive. Jovian opens negotiations. The price of escape is devastating. Rome surrenders key eastern fortresses, abandons long-held territories, and accepts a humiliating peace in exchange for safe passage. The army is allowed to march home, but the dream of victory is gone forever. The campaign is over. The gamble has failed. The doom is sealed. Julian's body is carried west. His gods remain silent. And in the wake of his death, the balance between Rome and Persia shifts, not with triumph, but with retreat. Part 4. Aftermath. Rome's retreat and Persia's triumph. Julian's death detonates the campaign. In the heart of enemy territory, the Roman army is suddenly leaderless, exhausted, and half-starved. Supplies are gone. The fleet is ash. Persian forces press in from all sides. Morale collapses. Not in panic, but in grim realization. There will be no victory, only survival. The officers move fast. They elevate Jovian, a competent but untested commander, not to win a war, but to end one. Jovian has no leverage. Within days, he enters negotiations with Shapur II, and the terms are brutal. Rome agrees to a 30-year peace at the cost of strategic humiliation. The empire surrenders Nisibis, its most vital eastern stronghold, along with 5 provinces beyond the Tigris. Roman influence in Armenia, the buffer state that shielded the east, is effectively abandoned. It is the greatest territorial concession Rome has made to Persia in centuries. The retreat that follows is scarcely less deadly than the campaign itself. The legions march home through hostile land, ravaged by disease, starvation, and exhaustion. Thousands never return. Veterans stagger back to Syria and Anatolia carrying not trophies, but the memory of a war that should never have been fought. Persia emerges stronger than ever. Shapur II stands triumphant, his borders secured, his prestige unmatched. For decades, he dominates the eastern balance of power. The Sassanid Empire has not merely repelled Rome, it has broken its momentum. Rome, by contrast, withdraws. The eastern frontier is suddenly exposed, thinner, more vulnerable. Fortified lines built over generations are gone. The dream of decisive eastern conquest dies with Julian on the sands of Samara. So too does Julian's spiritual vision. His attempt to revive the old gods collapses instantly. Pagan patronage ends. Christianity resumes its march as the empire's unchallenged faith. Julian's reign becomes an anomaly, a final flare of a world already passing away. The Persian expedition stands as Rome's last great offensive war in the east. After 363, Rome will defend, negotiate, and endure. But it will never again march so boldly toward the heart of Persia. The consequences are permanent. An emperor is lost, a frontier is redrawn, and the illusion of Roman invincibility in the east is shattered. What remains is legacy and warning. Part 5. Legacy, Julian's fall, and the twilight of pagan Rome. Julian's death is more than the loss of an emperor. It is the extinction of a worldview. With his blood on the sands of Mesopotamia, pagan Rome breathes its last. Julian had not merely ruled as a pagan. He had tried to reverse history itself, to drag the empire back toward the gods of marble and myth. His successors do not hesitate. The temples fall silent, imperial patronage vanishes, Christianity, no longer challenged, tightens its grip on power. What Julian attempted in a few defiant years is undone in months. The old gods never recover. Persia, meanwhile, stands at its zenith. Shapur emerges as the unchallenged master of the Near East. His borders are secure, his prestige immense. For a generation, the Sassanid Empire dominates the balance of power between the great civilizations. Yet even this triumph carries the seed of impermanence. 2 centuries later, the armies of Islam will shatter Persia as decisively as Julian's cannons once shattered illusions. But that storm still lies beyond the horizon. Rome's fate is quieter and more ominous. The borders stabilize, but only briefly. The eastern provinces bleed from the expedition's losses. Veteran legions gone, fortresses surrendered, confidence shaken. What survives is a leaner, more defensive empire, what historians will come to call Byzantium. The disaster of 363 becomes a prelude, foreshadowing centuries of struggle against Persia, Arabs, and eventually the tide of history itself. And Julian? He is not forgotten. He becomes a tragic figure, romanticized across generations. A philosopher-emperor who sought wisdom and glory and found death instead. To pagans, he is a martyr to the old faith. To historians, he is a cautionary tale. Brilliance undone by overreach, idealism shattered by reality. His campaign joins the lineage of catastrophic ambition. Crassus at Carrhae, Napoleon in Russia, empires that mistook confidence for destiny. Julian wanted to be Alexander. Instead, he became a warning. His Persian expedition teaches a brutal lesson etched across centuries: that no legacy, no ideology, no personal brilliance can bend geography, logistics, and time to ambition's will. At Samarra, an emperor fell, a religion faded, and Rome learned, too late, that even giants can bleed out in the desert. The march into Persia did not just end a campaign. It marked the twilight of pagan Rome and the dawn of a harsher, more uncertain age. Conclusion: the emperor who challenged time. Julian's Persian expedition ends not with victory, but with silence. On the banks of the Euphrates and the plains of Mesopotamia, Rome commits its last great gamble in the East, and loses everything that gamble required to succeed. An emperor, an army, a future imagined in the image of the past. What begins as a march of destiny collapses into retreat, hunger, and death beneath an unforgiving sun. Julian does not fail for lack of courage or intellect. He fails because he tries to resurrect a world that no longer exists. At Samarra, a single spear ends more than a life. It ends Rome's final pagan revival. It ends imperial dreams of conquest beyond the Euphrates. And it confirms a truth that history teaches again and again. Empires are not destroyed only by enemies, but by ambition unmoored from reality. Persia stands triumphant, Rome withdraws, and the balance of power hardens into borders that will define the ancient world for centuries. The legions march home thinner, poorer, and forever changed. The empire survives, but chastened, defensive, and drifting toward a new identity. Julian wanted to be remembered as a philosopher king who restored Rome's soul. Instead, he is remembered as the last emperor who tried. His campaign is Rome's final blaze of classical ambition, a moment when faith, pride, and destiny collided with logistics, terrain, and time itself. The desert did not care about gods or glory. It demanded only blood, and so the story closes where it began, beneath the Mesopotamian sun, where an emperor reached for immortality and found the end of an age.